feel like this summer has been a real mixed bag of reading. Like, I've either loved a book so much that I want to talk about it to everyone I meet, or it has been like a 1-star, 2-star situation. Like, I have read some really shit books this summer, and it put me into like a full reading slump. In August, I literally read like 2 books because I read one book that sent me into such a slump. I just couldn't face the idea of reading something else. But then in September, I went on holiday, I chose some great books to take with me, all picked up, and I read loads of books, which I absolutely loved. And I realised the other day that I have really been slacking on the books I've read recently front. Please let me know in the comments. I usually, if you're new here, every 10 books I read, I will do a video where I give you like the down low of those 10 books, how many stars I rated them, what I liked about them, what I didn't like about them. And I've done that literally on my platforms for like 5 years now, and I forgot to do them over the summer, and now I've got like 25 books which I just haven't spoken about, but now I feel like it's too many. So if you want me to get back into doing them, then let me know. If you're not that bothered about them, then maybe I'll just think of different formats to talk about my books in. But anyway, I want to tell you today all the books I've read in the last 4 or 5 months I absolutely loved. If you're new here, hi, I'm Georgia. On this channel, I love to talk about all things books, all things Taylor Swift, all things to do with queerness, which weirdly all feel very interconnected. It just works. I know it's a strange sort of niche, but it works. I mostly talk about sapphic books, so women loving women fiction, or psychological thrillers. So if they sound like your kind of thing, then make sure you click that subscribe button down below. And speaking of, the very first book I want to mention is this absolute beauty of a book. It is The Lesbianas Guide to Catholic School by Sonora Reyes. And when I say beauty, like, this cover is incredible. Like, that is so eye-catching. I love it. But also it's got these sprayed edges. Oh my god, wait, focus on that, not my face. Can you see that? Oh my god, it is gorgeous. No, focus on that, not my face. So pretty. This book is just gorgeous. Like, I want to display it to everyone all the time. This is a sapphic YA contemporary, and it is one of the best YA books I have ever read. Like, not even just this year, it's one of the best YAs I have ever read in my life. I am no longer a YA myself. I am 29 years old, but I still do love to read YA books, particularly all of the queer YA stuff that's coming out all the time at the moment. And this is just the best. I didn't feel as a 29-year-old reading it that it was too young for me. I felt like it really, like, you're obviously reading about teenagers, so the characters are young, but the writing didn't feel young. But equally, if you are a teenager reading this, then it's going to be like perfect. The lesbiana in question in this book is Yarmilette. She is Mexican American, and she has basically had a really bad experience at her school where she got outed as a lesbian, and things just went really, really bad for her. So she is now transferred to a new school with her brother, and the new school happens to be a Catholic school. And Yarmilette makes this sort of like pact with herself that she is not going to come out at this school. It's not worth the stress. She's there to look after her brother, who is like really gifted but also gets into arguments a lot, and she is the designated older sister. She is there to look after her brother. That is her job. She has no time for her personal dramas. Only, of course, it doesn't quite go that way for her. When Yarmilette gets to the school, she really quickly meets this really openly queer, openly proud girl called Beau, and feelings develop there. So obviously a big part of this book is the sort of like love story between Yarmilette and Beau and their relationship as it develops. But I don't think that is the biggest love story in this book. This feels like a dedication to family and how much it means to have family members looking out for you. It's really tender, it's really beautifully written. It sort of really goes into the intricacies of these sort of like familial relationships and how complicated that can be, particularly when you're the daughter of immigrant parents who maybe aren't supportive of LGBTQ people. Sonora Reyes really manages to cover such a wide range of really important topics in this book, but it never feels like she's sort of like throwing them in your face. It's not really that obvious. It's really subtle how she sort of like weaves these things into the narrative. So you're covering things like homophobia, racism, suicide, immigration issues, Colonialism is a really big one as well, and it's really clever how she does it. I find a lot of the time with YA queer books, obviously these authors want to cover these really important topics that people should be talking about, but it feels like it's being forced at you. It feels like you're not being slowly led to the point, led to the realisation yourself. You're being told by the author, this is my opinion, and this is what you should feel as well. Which, a lot of the time, I agree with that opinion, but as a reader it can be a bit like jolting, I suppose, and it feels like you're not reading a book, you're reading an author's opinion piece. And I do think there is a really fine line like between getting that right and getting that wrong. Snoh Reyes does it perfectly, like this should be the blueprint for that kind of thing. All of the characters in this book are so fully fleshed out, not just Yarmilette and Cesar, her brother, her mum, her ex-best friend, who you never really meet. I think you meet her once, like in person in the book, but other than that it's just like Yarmilette telling you about her ex-best friend, but she still feels like a fully fledged character. Beau, the love interest, is really fully fleshed out as well. The sort of like other girls at school, it's so beautifully written, and you would think to have that much detail a book would have to be like this thick, but it's not. It's like, what, 350 pages? No, not even. Yeah, 390 pages. It's so well written. I really, really highly recommend this. Speaking of really beautiful books, like also look at this. This is Onda and Santi Were Here by Johnny Garzavia. This cover is one of the most beautiful covers I've ever seen in my entire life. Like the art on this, oh my god. This cover actually has like even more significance once you've read the book, and I'm not going to tell you what that significance is because I don't want to spoil anything, but like the detail on it is so clever. As you would expect from such a beautiful and sort of like tender cover, this is one of the most touching love stories I've ever read in my entire life. Like this is up there with The Song of Achilles, it's up there with Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Like the love story in this, it reaches that kind of level where people are going to be talking about it for ages. People just need to read this book. Like people aren't talking about this book in the way I feel they should be. So this is a novel about Onda and Santi, and they are both Mexican, but they live in San Antonio in Texas. Onda is, I can't remember, second generation immigrant, I think. That might be wrong, but like his grandparents, I think, were immigrants. I can't remember the minute details of the book. But he is Mexican. He's very ingrained in Mexican culture. He feels very connected to his culture, but he has been born and raised in San Antonio in Texas, whereas Santi is an illegal immigrant. And I hate the term illegal immigrant. Like it really sits awfully with me, because the thought of anyone being illegal, the thought of a human being illegal is so wild to me. But he is illegally in San Antonio, there's no other way to put it, and Santi is living under constant threat of being deported. And when him and Onda first meet, he is like really fighting against a relationship. There is this like obvious instant attraction between the two of them, but Santi knows that this isn't something he should pursue because he is at risk of being caught being deported like any moment. And so that leads to this really sort of slow burn romance where they're sort of fighting against each other, or I should say Onda is not fighting so much because he doesn't really know why he can't be with Santi. But it's just really slow burn, it's really tender. They get to know each other as friends before any sort of like romance is allowed to fully blossom. Oh my god, it's so beautiful. There's just so much angst and so much yearning, and I love a book with really good yearning. There's a really, again, a fine line between like making it frustrating for the reader, like wondering why can't this couple be together. Like so many times in romances, the barriers between a couple, the reasons they can't be together are so insignificant, like they just don't matter. So many times they're just stupid, whereas in this book the reasons they can't be together, they are legitimate and they are real. And Onda and Santi, they read like real people on the page. Obviously their life experience is so far away from my own life experience, being a white British person living in England. Like I am not an immigrant, my British lineage goes back further than we can possibly find. So I have no connection to this story. Like I can't relate. But I felt like I was there. I felt like I was living it. I was crying when they were crying. And that is a sign of really wonderful writing. You're reading this book through the perspective of Onda. They are queer and non-binary, and as I'm saying that, I'm realising that I think I've been using he, him pronouns for Onda throughout this review. I'm so sorry. Always learning, always evolving. Them. They, them. So Onda is they, them. Santi is he, him. Onda's an artist, and is a major theme throughout this entire book. Like, it is woven so beautifully into the pages. And I felt like, again, you're reading, you're not seeing illustrations of this art, but I felt like I could see it through the descriptive writing of Johnny Garzavia. It's so incredible. But Onda doesn't want to feel typecast by being a Mexican artist. They don't want to be forced into like stereotypes and have expectations thrust upon them and their art. But also, they are Mexican, and that is a huge part of their art. So it's like really navigating that aspect of their life as well, and trying to figure out how that all fits in. This book touches on a lot of really timely real-world issues. I cried so many times in reading this book, and not just over the romance between the two main characters, just over the situation in which they find themselves in. It is so heartbreaking, and again, I touched on the point, how can a human be illegal because of some sort of like arbitrary border that somebody's put in place at some point in history? And that means these two wonderful characters can't be together. Like, oh, it's insane. It is insane to me. Please read this book. The next book I want to talk about is much lighter, don't you worry, and that is Hot Shot by Claire Lydon. This is a sapphic romance, an adult sapphic romance, based on football lesbians, which, as a lesbian who has recently got into football with the Women's Euros last year and the Lionesses winning, I got so into it, and now I like football. I always thought I hated football. Turns out I don't hate football, I just don't like men. I have no interest in seeing a load of sweaty men running around a pitch. Replace them with sweaty women, I'm all there. How did I not come out until I was 25? You ask me, I don't know. What was I doing? I have no idea. But football lesbians, where was I going with that? As somebody who's only like a year into their football journey, and as somebody who, to be honest, only started following the football and the players for the lesbians and the lesbian drama, we don't get much rep, okay? We don't get much representation out there in the world. Football is where it's at. And rugby as well, apparently, but I'm not really into rugby. But as somebody who's sort of like newly in that world, I feel like this book really taught me a lot about like how football as a sport works here in the UK, and how like the teams work and the dynamics in the teams and like the different roles and stuff. Honestly, it taught me loads, but I wasn't in it for that reason. I was in it for the lesbians. This book is just fun and enjoyable. You have Sloane, who is a US soccer star. She is this massive, like one of the biggest football stars in the world. Think like Megan Rapinoe kind of level is what I was getting. And then you've got Ella, who isn't a footballer herself, or she was in her teenage years, but she had an injury, means she couldn't play anymore. So now she is the personal development coach or lifestyle and something performance. She is the lifestyle and performance coach now for this new team, something, I can't remember, Silchester, something. She's a new coach for this team, and then Sloane Patterson comes over and joins the team, and immediately there is like obvious chemistry between these two characters, and what commences as a very slow burn romance. Sloane has recently just got out of an engagement with her ex-fiance who cheated on her. Ella is in this position where she's like the performance coach, like can she be having relationships with the players? And so they need to figure all that out before they can come together. But again, what I really liked about this book is it's not just about the romance. There's also a really wonderful side story with Sloane not really being close to the family. They're very religious. She is lesbian. They just don't really get on, they don't really see each other, there's a lot of tension there. And when Sloane comes over to the UK, she actually does so with the intention of tracing back to her great-great-grandmother or her great-grandparents, who she knew played for a local team at this time. And there's this whole like lore, whole story about her great-grandparents, and then she meets her like extended family through that. And so it's kind of a story about like found family as well, and chosen family, and it's really beautiful. I would potentially maybe argue with this book that the slow burn romance was a bit too slow burn. Like I did start to get frustrated at a certain point, but just push through, you get there eventually. Also, I found Ella as a character quite frustrating sometimes. Like, at one point, there's obviously, like, the third act breakup, or, like, I can't remember the minutiae of what happened. But basically, there's a miscommunication in the, like, third act of the book, and they end up falling apart. That doesn't feel like a spoiler, because that happens in every romance book ever. But Ella's inability to even, like, stop and listen to Sloane for even a moment is so frustrating. Like, she just takes an idea and she just runs with it. And you know what? That probably is quite true to life, because I know many people that do that. But just, like, the lack of communication. Like, you're a lesbian, you're supposed to be talking about everything all the time. It's our stereotype. Like, just listen to her, have a conversation, like, pour your heart out. I did find that frustrating, but overall, this was a fun and enjoyable sapphic adult romance. And I actually think I got it for free on Kindle Unlimited, so that could be worth bearing in mind. I actually really enjoy all of Claire Lydon's books. I've read 3, I think, so far, and all 3 have been fantastic. Sorry to report, we're now heading back into serious territory with When You Call My Name by Tucker Shaw. I picked this book up on a complete whim. I had a few hours spare in London. I went to Gaze the Word bookshop, which is a queer bookshop in... oh, where is it? It's near sort of like King's Cross, St Pancras Way. And I was browsing in there, and I had never heard of this book. I actually went in with the intention of buying a specific book, and then I didn't end up buying that. I ended up buying this one. Hadn't ever heard of it, but I was intrigued by the cover, and then when I turned it over, this is the blurb on the back. It's 1990 in New York City. Adam is falling in love for the first time. Ben is leaving home for the last. Drawn by the city's irresistible energy, the boys are swept up into the queer scene, where the potential for life and love seems limitless. But as the shadows of prejudice gather, Ben and Adam discover how the newfound community is facing a looming threat of AIDS, which will touch their lives more closely than they could ever have imagined. You're in New York City, it's talking about AIDS, it's queer, you know I had to read this. I'm really into like queer history as a whole, but the AIDS crisis is something that I have such a deep, fascinating interest in, so any book about that, I'm immediately sold. I want to learn everything about it. And this book is just so powerful when it's talking about those things, and I actually really don't think the cover or the back of the book does it any favours in sort of like telling the reader just how heartbreaking and just how heart-wrenching this book is going to be. I feel like it really sort of like diminishes that. Generally, I'm just not a fan of like real people on book covers anyway. And then on the back, you've got these like Polaroids of New York City. It's very 1989 coded. But I was worried it's sort of like going to make light of it. I don't know, don't love the cover, but don't judge a book by its cover, because this book was beautiful. I feel like I'm describing every book here as beautiful, but I stand by it, they are. Our 2 main characters here are Adam and Ben. Adam is a film fanatic who works in a local video store. This is the 1990s. He works in a video store in the West Village, and he's also grown up in the West Village his entire life. And the West Village is a pivotal place for the gay rights movement. It's where Stonewall happened. It's where the gay rights movement is said to have like begun. I say that in like air quotes, but generally that's what the thought is. So the West Village is a really powerful place to set this book. So Adam is a film buff, and one day a boy called Callum comes into his shop and is flirting with him and asks him to go see a movie. And what commences a really, again, beautiful, find another word, Georgia, find another word, a really tender love story. Only it's very clear that Callum's sort of like holding Adam. Who am I talking about? Adam. Callum's very much holding Adam at arm's length, because it's quite clear that he is hiding something. There's something he doesn't want Adam to know. And it comes to be that Callum has HIV, and he keeps like disappearing for like periods of time. And then Adam finds out that he's been in hospital, but Callum doesn't want to like tell him this because he doesn't want him to worry. And of course there's like a lot of arguments, a lot of heartbreak. Just like, how do you navigate a relationship like that? You fall in love with somebody for the first time, and it's risky to have sex. At this point in 1990, they knew that condoms were a fantastic preventer of HIV, of its spread. But it's like, how do you navigate that world as an 18-year-old boy, like just beginning to discover who you are, and this is your first experience of love? Like, what do you do with that? So you sort of follow their entire story, and I'm not going to tell you what happens in the end, but it's really, really touching. so heartbreaking and beautiful. Stop it. Stop saying beautiful. And our other character here is Ben. He is fashion obsessed and he's like kind of kicked out of his mum's home when she finds out that he's gay. So he heads to New York City where he moves in with his older brother. And his older brother like is generally quite accepting but also like very worried, as you would be. Again, 1990s, AIDS is still a massive thing. HIV AIDS is a massive thing. His brother's very worried and Ben is like, that's homophobia, like stop telling me I can't live my life. And like his brother's just like worried, and it like very much covers all of the intricacies, all the nuances of being a gay man in this time, being a gay man who's coming of age. But Ben has a very different story to Adam. He doesn't find somebody and fall in love. He is out there living his best queer life. He is going to the nightlife. He is meeting people. And so through these two different stories, you really see the two different aspects of the queer community and what it means to be queer, and it's so beautiful. It covers the love and it covers the community. And there is this really interesting juxtaposition between the two stories, which I have no doubt is intentional on behalf of the author, because you've got these two 18-year-old boys, gay boys, sort of coming of age, coming to realise who they are. They are living such different experiences, and Adam is so much more affected by the HIV/AIDS crisis than Ben is. For Ben, it's kind of like an afterthought, it's something that doesn't really affect him, whereas you've got Adam, and it's affecting kind of his whole life. His whole world is HIV/AIDS. So Adam and Ben's stories are told throughout this in the third person, but you've also got these really interesting chapters throughout the book written in first person by somebody you never find out who they're written by. But they're basically like reflections and reminiscing on a childhood and of like a coming of age story of whoever this mysterious third character is. And I think it's meant to be mysterious. I think you're not meant to know who it is as the reader, because it's meant to be reflective of the general experience of being a gay man in this time. So as an example, this chapter is entitled Tell Me When You Knew For Sure, and it's basically this mysterious third character telling you, like literally telling you as the reader, when they knew for sure that they were gay. Very anecdotal, this third person, this sort of like third mysterious character is saying they knew for sure when they were watching the Olympics in 1976 on TV, and the grandmother was saying how beautiful one of the female gymnasts was basically in her performance. Whereas he, as a 4-year-old, was obsessed with one of the male gymnasts, and he noticed a very strange look on his grandmother's face, and that's when he realised that he'd done something wrong, but he didn't know what it was. And my personal theory is that these sort of like little anecdotes throughout the book are the personal anecdotes of the author of Tucker Shaw, but it could also equally be other characters in the book as well. But I like to think it's the author's like personal interjections, which just adds a really personal layer to the book. But I don't know. I actually haven't looked up anything about Tucker Shaw and about when they were born. I don't know if they're old enough. I don't know, but I don't want to really know. I like the thought they might be the author and their personal stories. And we're going to end with 2 psychological thrillers that I've read in the past like month, and they were both so good. Sadly, didn't quite reach that 5 stars. I do feel like me now with psychological thrillers, I don't know what a book's got to do for it to like surprise me enough for it to reach that 5-star status. I just know that neither of these books quite did it. But I know I'm really, really fussy. So like my 4-star in this genre is probably somebody else's like 6-star, 7-star. So bear that in mind. The first book is Don't Let Her Stay by Nicholas Sanders. This is obviously a psychological thriller. And when I tell you, this one was so scary at certain points. Like I could literally feel my heart beating out of my chest. Like I had to like put down my Kindle and like put it to one side and like take a 24-hour break because it was just too much. The suspense in this book was too much for me. Our main character is Joanne, and she has a very idyllic life. She has this wonderful husband and they together have a daughter called Evie, and they live in this really beautiful house, kind of like out in the sticks. They met in London, they used to live in London, but they decided to like go out to the countryside and have this incredible house and have this amazing life for all their kids they were going to have. Richard works a like really high-flying job in London, and Joanne's like a bit bored. Like she sees the vision in moving to this like house in the middle of nowhere and this like village in the middle of nowhere, but she's bored, she's looking for stuff to sort of like entertain her day, and she's just not quite happy. And that is when Richard turns around to her one day and he's like, my 20-year-old daughter, who's ignored me ever since the day that I told her I was getting married to you, has suddenly come back into the picture and she wants to come stay with us for a few days and meet her younger sister. And Joanne's like, yes, bring her, maybe she can entertain me for a little bit. So 20-year-old Chloe, she turns 21 in the book, turns up at the house, and it's very clear from the get-go that Chloe has an ulterior motive. She is not there to be friends with Joanne. She's not necessarily even there to sort of look after Evie, her little sister. She is there to manipulate, and she's one of these adults, we all know an adult like this, who acts like a child all the time. I find it so frustrating, people who ham up the I'm so young and innocent and you need to help me to certain people. All that drives me mad, and Chloe is one of those. So as the days go by and it's clear that Chloe is not going anywhere, she starts to notice some very strange things that Chloe's doing around Evie. And Joanne starts to get very, very suspicious and paranoid about what might be going on. Only whenever she mentions it to her husband, he obviously defends his daughter Chloe because he loves her. And as time goes on, things start happening that are weirder and weirder, and Joanne she's losing it a little bit, as you would do in a situation like this. But this book is so cleverly written because you really start to doubt yourself as the reader, because going in, it is written for you to think that yes, Chloe is 100% doing these things. And then it kind of shifts a little bit and you start to doubt Joanne. Have I been saying Joanna? I can't remember. She's called Joanne. You start to doubt her yourself and you have no idea what's going to happen. And I love that because I have such a thing with psychological thrillers, because I've read so many in my time, that I can always guess the ending. So there's a good chunk in the middle where I just had no idea what was going on. And that brings us to the ending, which I thought was really disappointing, because by about 70% through the book I was like, well, I know exactly what's going to happen here. And it did. And I kept waiting, because so much of the book had been filled with so many amazing twists that I didn't see coming. I was waiting for the twist at the end. And there is a twist at the end, only I 100% saw that twist coming. So was it a twist? Probably not. Maybe I expected too much, but it just felt very obvious to me. I feel like a lot of thriller books, they very much follow the same formula, and once you've read a certain amount, you can see that formula a mile off. But again, that is probably a very personal me problem. I would still entirely recommend this book. I really, really enjoyed this book. I just didn't like the ending very much. Which brings us onto our final book, and that is What Lies Between Us by John Marrs. This is my first ever John Marrs experience, and you better believe I'm going to be reading way more of his books now. This is a very tumultuous story about a mother-daughter relationship gone wrong, but I feel like saying it's mother-daughter relationship gone wrong is minimising it somewhat. This is one of the worst examples of a mother and daughter relationship that I have ever seen in my life. Things is not good. It's not good between them, to say the least, because Nina, who is the daughter, has her mother, Maggie, chained up in the attic of their house. So the book opens, you find out that Maggie is being held captive. She is let out once every 2 days, where her and her daughter have dinner at the dining room table together, but she is literally kept chained up with a long chain that leads from the attic down to the dining room. And then she goes back up, and that is it for the next 2 days. That is all the sort of communication she has with the outside world. So immediately upon going into the book, you are obviously Team Maggie, because she is being held captive by her clearly psychopathic daughter. But it's quite clear that Maggie's done something to piss her daughter off, which has led to her being in this situation. Only there's very, very, very few scenarios in which I can imagine justifies an action like this. If there's any justifiable reasons for something like this, I don't know. As you go through the book, the chapters switch between Maggie and Nina, and with each chapter you sort of learn another layer of the story between them, and it's so convoluted. There's so much that happened in their past. It switches between the current day and 25 years ago. It switches between the two characters. You would think that's confusing, but it really wasn't at all. I was able to keep track of it really easily. I feel like John Marrs did that really neatly and really succinctly. He had a really sort of obvious voice, I found, between the present day versus the past. There is so much tension in this book, between these characters. It is palpable. Like, it is so clear that this daughter hates her mother with a burning passion, but you don't find out why until like a really good chunk into the book. I thought at 18%, I looked at my Kindle and I was like, I know what happened here. Like, I know, I can't even begin to say it because I don't want to spoil anything, because I feel like you need to experience this for yourself. There are so many layers to this. But at 18%, I looked at my Kindle and I was like, this is what's going to happen. And by like 50%, it had happened. By 70%, I was wrong. Like, you were clearly like meant to be thinking this was going to happen. And then it did happen. And then it unravelled. And did you just hear my tummy rumble? Oh my God, that was so loud. I actually haven't eaten yet today, but it's only because I'm going to Costco as soon as I finish filming this, and I wanted to save myself for a cheese jacket potato in Costco, which I'm very excited for, but I'm very hungry, so let's round this up. This is such a convoluted relationship. Like, this mother and daughter, like, they can't live with each other, they can't live without each other. From everything I know about borderline personality disorder, if I was to sort of diagnose the daughter, Nina, with anything, it would be borderline personality disorder, but like written for a book. So like, obviously it's all very exaggerated and the emotions like really heightened, but that's the only way I can really explain what Nina as a character is like. It's so suspenseful. This is full of really shocking twists. Nina is such a cleverly written character. I just thought it was genius the way all this unravelled. But again, I gave it 4 stars, maybe 4.5 stars to be honest. I didn't like the ending. I will admit I didn't see the ending coming. I didn't predict it. Like, there is no way I could have guessed that this is what would happen in the last scene of the book. I just didn't like it. I felt like it was kind of a cop-out. There was... no, I'm not going to say what I was about to say because that'd be a spoiler. I just didn't like the ending, but other people apparently really, really did. So again, that is a me problem. I have seen rumours that this book has been bought by Renee Zellweger. Like, the rights to this book have been bought by Renee Zellweger. So it might be becoming a movie or a TV series. That would be really interesting. I will tell you nothing. That would be a fascinating TV series. It would be so good. And with that, I'm going to go to Costco and get my jacket potato so my stomach can stop screaming at me. I would highly recommend all 6 of these books. There is not a single one here that I would recommend over the others. No, that's a lie. I'd recommend Onda and Santi. If you read any of these books, read this one. But also, you won't be disappointed with any of them. They're all so good. Please let me know in the comments down below what your favourite book is that you read in the summer. My tummy is just still rumbling. I'm just going to keep talking. I'm aware that I'm a bit late to be doing like a books I read in the summer video. I'm filming this on August 13th. No, October 13th. But we had this like weird summer at the beginning of August. Like, last week it was like 27 degrees, which was so weird. So it feels like summer has only just ended in like the last like 3 days. This is the first day I'm wearing like a knit jumper outside of the house. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.